Hi, second period. I have Sophie here with me today, and she has a joke for you. Sophie, what's your joke?
What do you call, why does a carpet move?
Why does a carpet move? We don't know, Sophie. Why?
Because it's a magic carpet.
Oh, it's a magic
Oh, and
carpet,
what do you
like on Aladdin.
Yeah, and what do you call a bear on a beach?
What do you call a bear on a beach? What, Sophie? Lost.
No, you don't say it like that.
Oh.
You have to go like this. Lost.
Lost. Okay. A lost bear on a beach and a magic carpet.
Oh,
All right. Chapter 44 is called Flight. And Molly kind of gave Master Windsor an ultimatum and said, you can take this key and go back into the house and back to your tree and keep doing what you're doing, or you can come with us and you can live. Molly opened the door to Penny's bedroom. Are you finished, miss? Finished? I've only just started. Penny sat on the floor of her room, an open suitcase before her. It was overflowing with stuffed animals and toys and blocks. She held up 2 dolls, one in each hand. I can't decide which one to keep. She looked between them and then threw them both to the floor, exasperated. Why are we even leaving? Your father thinks it's best, and I'm inclined to agree. Molly wandered through the room, collecting an assortment of clothes for the girl's journey, which she placed over one arm. She passed over the most beautiful dresses, instead taking clothes that could stand the most wear. She did not know where Master Windsor and his family would end up living, but it would likely be no place for frills. Molly knelt down next to Penny and began repacking the suitcase. But what if I don't want to leave? Penny asked. Molly removed most of the toys to make room for Penny's clothes. I thought you hated it here, miss. I do hate it, only there's some things I don't want to leave behind. Molly removed a stuffed bear to find a stack of Princess Penny books. Gilded pages shone through bright even in the shadows. Things like these? The girl nodded. She touched the topmost book, picking at its corners. The cover was adorned with a bright picture of the princess battling an ogre who looked surprisingly like Alistair. Molly put a hand on the girl's shoulder, looking her straight in the eye. Miss Penny, there's better stories in the world than these. The girl looked like she might cry. Like your stories? Molly winked. On a good day. She gently removed the books from the suitcase and set them on the floor. Besides, the dolls might want something to read. She closed the case, latched it tight, and led Penny into the hall. The rest of the house was in a state of complete disarray. Since deciding to leave, Master Windsor had become a man of pure ascension, perhaps fearing that if he didn't leave quickly, he might lose his nerve. He had spent the last few hours rushing from room to room, collecting what essentials they might be able to fit on their carriage. A reluctant Alistair trailed behind him, helping when necessary. Molly went outside to check on her brother, who had been given the job of preparing the wagon for their journey. She found him in the drive, hoisting a large metal canister onto the bed of the wagon. There were several other containers, all of them different, some of which she had recognized from the kitchen. What is all this? She said. Kip wiped his hands on his trousers. Lamp oil, axe grease, turpentine, lard, even a bit of brandy. You're planning to cook something? Sort of. He steadied himself on the wagon, trying to keep off his bad leg. Molly looked around for his crutch, but once again could not see it. I know we cannot hurt the tree, but I think we can make it harder to reach. If we take down the bridge, it'll be long before anyone comes near here again. The wood's too thick to cut down, but I think there's a better way. He tapped a canister. Soon as we're across the bridge with the family, I'll pour every drop of oil on the beams and light the whole thing up. Molly looked at the rows of rusted containers. You sure this isn't just about making a giant explosion? She said. Kip grinned. That too. By late afternoon, the family was packed and ready to go. Bags and trunks lined the foyer. The last step was Master Windsor. Mistress Windsor. Constance had regained consciousness, but was still too weak to move on her own. Molly entered the bedroom with Master Windsor and Alistair to find Constance clutching her chest, panic on her face. "Bertrand," she sat up. "My ring!" Master Windsor rushed to her, clutching her hand. "No, my love, no more rings." He stroked her brittle hair. "We're getting you out of here. We're going someplace safe." Molly saw Alistair out the corner of her eye. He was watching his parents, and his usually scornful look had given way to something more complicated. He bit the inside of his cheek, as if calculating some difficult sum. Molly glanced out the window. The red sun hung just above the crest of the valley. She put a gentle hand on Bertrand's shoulder. "It's nearly sundown." Master Windsor let go of his wife and stood. The bed frame was too wide to fit through the doorway, and so they decided to carry Mistress Windsor separately from her mattress, which would have to be turned on one side. He carefully lifted her into his arms, while Molly and Alistair dragged the heavy feather mattress out into the hall. Mistress Windsor walked behind them, whispering to his wife as one might whisper to a child. By the time they reached the foyer, she seemed to have fallen unconscious once more. Bertrand gingerly lowered her onto the mattress, which Molly and Alistair had placed in front of the stairs. Molly helped Bertrand wrap blankets around his wife's frame. "If she doesn't make it," he said, touching her sleeping face. Molly heard the sound of a horse approaching on the drive. "That'll be Kip with the wagon." Bertrand stood up, a suitcase in his hand. He lingered in the middle of the foyer, his eyes drifting from the walls to the windows to the ceiling. One final look at the house he had grown up in. "I don't think I'll miss it," he said. "You'd be surprised," Molly said, but then she added, "That still don't mean you should stay." Bertrand walked to the front door, took the handle, and opened it. "Evening, Governor." Bertrand let out a small shriek of alarm, dropping his suitcase. Molly looked up to see two men propped against the doorway, one improbably tall, the other unusually squat, both reeking with the unmistakable odor of the city. Mr. Figg and Mr. Stubbs stepped into the house, eyeing the shocked family. Stubbs grinned. "Going somewhere?" So they thought when they heard the horse it was just Kip coming to get them, but it was really Figg and Stubbs. Bad timing. Chapter 45 is called Unwelcome Guests. Molly lay on the foyer floor. Her feet and hands were tied with coarse rope, which cut like sandpaper against her skin. She struggled against the binds, trying to find a loose spot to slip her hand through, but none would reveal itself. The room around her was now a wasteland of overturned suitcases and torn curtains and broken furniture. "Molly, I'm scared," said a voice in her ear. It was Penny, tied up like the rest of them. Her glasses were fallen off her face and were lying on the floor. "Hush, love." Molly forced a smile. "You'll be fine." A sort of cascading crash hit her ears. It sounded as if one of the men were pulling books down from the shelves in the study. Unlike on their previous visit, Figg and Stubbs had wasted no time with threats and ultimatums. They had tied up the family almost immediately and began ransacking the house. "Sounds like they're having fun," Kip muttered from her other side. He had at first tried to hide in the stables, but Figg had found him and put him next to Molly. This at least allowed them to talk openly without startling the others. "We have to get out of here," Molly whispered, too quietly for Penny to hear. "When the sun goes down, the night gardener will be here, and something tells me he'll still be angry." She craned her neck, looking through the open front door. The sun over the trees was a boiling red, the last gasps of daylight quickly draining from the sky. "So much for our simple plan," Kip said. Figg and Stubbs wandered back into the foyer with a casual, almost friendly air. Long splinters and bits of cushion fluff clung to their shabby coats. Figg had the Windsor portrait in his hands, holes punched into the canvas. "Look at this, Stubbs." He pushed his head through a hole above Constance's body. "Ain't I pretty?" he said, making kissing sounds. "Well, that does it for the study," Stubbs said, wiping his hands. "Next stop, the bedrooms." He looked at Master Windsor, who had blood on his face from where they had struck him. "Lest you just want to save us the trouble." I already told you I have nothing," Bertrand sputtered. Stubbs cocked his head to one side. And I told you, a man don't leave his house without squirreling away a few earthly possessions. Fig pulled something from Constance's open trunk. How's these for earthly possessions? He waved a pair of stockings over his head. This wasn't our agreement, Bertrand said. You weren't supposed to be here until tomorrow. Well, that's the thing, Stubbs said, scratching his head. When you've been in this business long as me and Fig, you learn a few things, like how folks tend to disappear right when they're expecting you. So we like to pop in a day or two early. He propped a foot on one of the suitcases, which I think you'll agree was a wise precaution. All right, I'm going to stop right there. Have a good day.